All right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another awesome Sales Hacker webinar. Really excited to have everyone here. Let's just give it a couple secs to let people roll in before we get going here. Let's see here who we've got here. As people are rolling in, please feel free to throw your name here in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from, your role. Let us know what you want to hear today. We'd like to hear from you. All right, let's see who we've got jumping on here in the chat. All right, don't be shy, guys. Here we go. We got Frank from Denver. We got Danielle, sorry, from Dreambox Learning. Awesome, Senior Director of Sales. Who else we got? Come on, guys, let's get interactive here. We want to make this a participative session. And we'll just give it another couple seconds to get some more participants before we jump in. Lots of very keen interest in today's topic, of course. And so really looking forward to hearing some good questions here. We got Kent from Wisconsin. All right, who else we got? Throw your name in the chat here, guys. Throw your title. Let us know where you're coming in from today and what you want us to cover off. Lots of opportunity for Q&A though. Okay, you know what? Let's see here. We've got quite a few folks already in here. And you know what? The folks that are late, they can just catch up. Let's get this party started. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Kennett from Replays. Super excited to be moderating this webinar with some very interesting folks on a very interesting topic. So a little bit of housekeeping today. Please, if you have any questions, just throw it in the Q&A. We're going to try and get to your questions either in a live format by asking our panelists, or we've got some team members that are from Blueboard, with Morgan and Gloria, who are going to be actually answering some of your questions in the chat. In the Q&A as well, and in the chat. Okay, so let's dive in here. Let's start with our topic today, and then we'll do some introductions. So today, I mean, sales leaders, how many of you have had your world turned upside down the last little bit? And we all have, but in particular, if you had President's Club on the books, what are you doing? We want to hear from you. We're going to do a poll in just a couple minutes, but what we've got here is a couple expert panelists. They're going to walk through their thoughts on how we can look at things a little bit differently in terms of ensuring that as sales leaders, we're still stepping up, doing the right thing for our teams, and not necessarily taking the easy way out and just saying, hey, let's do cash incentives. And we're going to have some good dialogue around that today. But before we do, I'd love to just do a quick round of intros. So Kevin, co-founder and COO of Blueboard, let's throw it over to you first. Could you give us a quick intro of yourself and your company, please?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Kevin Yip, started a company called Blueboard. I'm calling in from San Francisco. What we do is we help companies, Procter & Gamble, Google, Lyft, Pinterest, reward their employees to individual experiences, right? And so that's anything from, a personal trip to hike Machu Picchu, right? Maybe that's a family getaway to the Caribbean, or that could just be like a cooking class, right? And so, we're all about creating memories and moments for employees for great work.
I love that. A very unique perspective to share today, and looking forward to hearing it. Thank you, Kevin. And we've got Tom Castley, VP Sales for Outreach in UK. Tom, welcome. Love to hear a quick intro from yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so Tom Castley, I work for Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. And I have the distinct pleasure of helping Outreach expand internationally. So we opened our first office outside of domestic US earlier this year, and enjoying the journey. And really looking forward to this conversation as, having been to President's Club a few times through hard work and a little bit of luck, and now as a sales leader.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, thank you for joining. And we really don't want to do that traditional thing where we just sit here and talk about our companies and stuff. We want to get right into the content that you showed up here for today. And by the way, we're recording this and we're going to be sending it through to you. We'd love it if you participate and be here for the whole hour. But if you can't be, we will be sending you a recording. Oh, wow. Like 20 people just dropped off. I shouldn't have said that. Joking. All right. Here we go. Let's dive into this thing here. You know what, let's get it kicked off with a couple of polls first. So we want to hear from you. Number one, traditionally, does your company have a President's Club? So you're going to see a poll jump on the screen here in just a sec. And number two, if you've traditionally had President's Club, are you canceling it this year? So we're going to get some quick results here, and then we're going to discuss. So does your company officially have a President's Club? Interesting. So far we're around sort of 60% no, actually, and 40% yes. All right. You know, I'm excited about that because what that tells me is we've got, of the 40% that said yes, I'm sure you're forced to think about it differently, and we're going to talk a lot about that. For those that don't do it, man, there's some awesome options out there. I've personally learned a lot this last week through talking to Kevin about this, as well as Tom. So we're going to hear some neat options for you both there. Let's just do that second poll real quick here. If you're not canceling, how are you adapting? So for those of you, the 40% that are actually have traditionally done President's Club, what you doing as your plan B, or how are you thinking about it? Please just quickly throw something in there, and then we're going to have some really good dialogue around this. Okay, so in terms of, yeah, we've got a number of folks that are looking for help on new ideas, number of folks that are thinking about transitioning to cash, gift cards. Okay, cool. I think today what we're going to find is often the default is cash, gift cards, fair. There's some other neat options out there that folks are using. We're going to hear stories about that shortly here. Okay, thanks for participating, guys. I love it. I appreciate it. Reminder, throw some Q&A in there, and we'll ensure we get to your questions. All right, let's just level set, right? Let's start with why President's Club, first of all. So, like, we've got 40% people that do, but 60% don't. So, Kevin, let's start with you. Like, traditionally, why have organizations done President's Club? Maybe for folks that aren't as familiar with the terminology, just walk us through a level set on what it is.
Yeah, so it's an annual incentive trip for, you know, traditionally the top sales reps, right? And it could be structured in a number of different ways. You know, you usually talk and promote it. Hey, next year on August 1st, we're going to Bermuda, right? And they talk about it for the entire year as it leads up to it. You know, I think of it as both an incentive and a recognition trip, right? How do we get reps to push and, you know, close as many deals as possible to qualify? And then once they do qualify, it's a recognition trip to really celebrate those top salespeople, right? Make them feel exclusive, make them feel like literally a part of a club. And so, you know, to me, it's a lot of the value is cultural. Motivating beyond kind of the commission paycheck of every deal. But Tom, would love to hear, you know, some of your thoughts on going to a lot of President's Clubs.
Yeah, so I totally get everything you've said. The other one that kind of springs to my mind is kind of my wife, my significant other. And actually President's Club, when I think about it, it's more actually for her than it was for me. I mean, there are reasons, I'll come on to that for a minute, but you know, we had a fiscal year end. I'm typically either on kind of Salesforce quarters, you know, end of January, or when I was at Oracle for quite some time, it was end of May. And I always remember, you know, come like summertime, you've been to club. She's already asking me, so where are we going next year? What are you doing to achieve that? How can I support you? Yeah. And so, you know, the craziness that there is in sales, kind of this ebb and flow of work. One is that's kind of where you get the support from your family from. And, you know, she still talks about some of those trips that we went on. So she's like the best CRO a company could ask for. She puts me under pressure. Yeah. The other thing for me is that, you know, being in remote territories, I've worked for US companies for 20 odd years, 26 years now, good Lord. Your access to the execs is pretty limited, you know, 1 or 2 trips a year. When you go to President's Club, you have some quality time with those people. It's golden. You can't pay for that. And, you know, so as much as reward and recognition, it's like, right, well, I've smashed it out of the park this year. And I want to know how I can do that next year. And I also want to use this time to kind of reinforce my brand in the business. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's so many awesome things that come from President's Club. And our world's been turned upside down in a lot of ways. And we've just heard from the folks that are actually on this webinar that half of them have done President's Club in the past, and the majority are looking at other options. So Kevin, what are other options you're hearing out there for traditional President's Club? Some folks have been spending literally hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and booked for a year, and they've just had to cancel. And now they're looking at plan B. Love to hear some of the plan Bs that you're seeing out there.
Yeah, no, totally. And so, one of the things we've heard early on in the conversation is almost kicking the can down the road, right? Hey, we're going to postpone this to Q3, Q4, maybe roll it up to next year as trip. And I think as time goes by, and people are feeling like, hey, a group trip, at the end of this year is not going to feel comfortable. Not for me, not for the business, not for our top performers. People are really starting to think things differently, right? And so the first thing we hear, right, is cash, right? And cash, gift cards. Maybe we kind of return to the 1970s or 80s of the Rolex watch. We've heard, and I think what this kind of does is it feels like an easy way to to kind of figure something out to get people excited, right? And so another thing we're hearing is like, okay, like, hey, we love the travel, we love the experiential side of President's Club. Could we do that individually, right? And so there's a lot of options about, hey, how can we deliver a personal experience, personal travel to these folks? And so that's where, what's up?
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to pause there for a sec. I'm curious on Tom's thoughts. Tom, we hear, we've been leading sales reps for years, and sales reps are coin operated, right, to a large extent. Fact or fiction? What's your opinion on that? We're talking, Kevin's saying, hey, you know what? People are kind of hitting the easy button and saying cash rewards. Why not cash rewards, or why cash rewards? Do you support it?
Yeah, well, of course, there's a myriad of answers. So there's 4 generations at work now, and not all 4 of them are motivated the same way as I am in my generation. Yeah. So yeah, cash is absolutely king, but experience is what creates loyalty, is what creates memories. It engenders people to the organization. And for me, the worst incentive in the world is one that appears on eBay 24 hours later. I mean, if I got a Rolex watch, I don't need it. I've got an Apple Watch. Yeah, it goes on eBay. I mean, that's not an incentive. That's literally, it was a whatever it was Rolex watch, and now I'm selling it for half the price because everybody thinks it's fake. I mean, no, thank you. And for the younger generations, who are coming through, you give them a cash incentive. The reward is it pays off a bit of their debt. I mean, where's the experience in that? We've got to have some variety in how we motivate people.
Right. And, I hate to sort of almost be crass here, but the reality is we want to get as much mileage as possible as a sales organization and as an organization if we're going to invest in President's Club. And I love the idea of experiences. One of the benefits of experience is shareability, right? The fact that, and Tom, I know we had a pre-conversation about this, and you were mentioning, hey, there's going to be leverage on social media. People aren't necessarily going to be tweeting and putting on Instagram about their Apple Watch. But if they go to Machu Picchu with their loved one, they probably are.
Yeah. You've got that whole piece of the pie. The other one is, look, when I think about President's Club as a sales leader now, there's 2 things that happen. At the end of the financial year, you get rid of the low performers. After President's Club is actually when you're at risk of getting rid of your top performers. They leave because they hang around for the President's Club because guess what? Their wife will either say, well, you need to take me to Maui and spend a fortune, or we go with the company, and they leave. I actually, when I was thinking about the whole individual trips thing, there's part of me that says, well, hang on a minute. Actually, I can diversify my risk. If I can change when these trips happen, and then spend a little bit more on some, a little bit less on others based on their impact to the business, and not just salespeople, but other roles as well. That gives me, I'm de-risking my business and giving me a variety of reward as well. So I can motivate the individual. And I think if somebody put into the chat, and I've got to say I am the same, if you lowered the camera down, I don't have a beach body. Well, I do. I take my body to the beach. That's my beach body. But, hanging around in some swim trunks with my coworkers isn't my best angle. And so, individual stuff makes sense. Yeah.
Hey, Tom, for millennials like you and I have to say, keeping that beach body is tough. Kevin, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I know. Dave, when you talked about kind of shareability, so that it was interesting. We actually didn't sit in a room say, hey, we're going to offer President's Club to the market, we actually got dragged in. And so Salesforce last year, one of their sales leaders said, hey, we don't want to, take all of our top, hundreds of top reps and go to Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Hawaii, or, Mexico this year, right? Let's give everyone an individual travel experience, right? And so there was a little like, hey, but we like the access to leadership. We like getting together, right? But as, people started to, choose their experience, go on it, right? We sent an EMEA rep with her sister on a safari to South Africa, right? We had a daughter bring her parents on their 50th wedding anniversary to Croatia, right? And so you think about these life moments, right? No one's gonna forget them, right? They're posting about it, they're talking about it. And then you take that and you extrapolate that across your entire top performers, right? At some companies, it's hundreds of people, right? All individual stories, all something memorable and unique to them. That's incredibly powerful, right? And so, it was something that it actually had a little bit of resistance internally at Salesforce. And then once, people started going on the trips, talking about it, it was a hit. And so we're like, hey, there's something here. And that's when we kind of decided to figure this out.
Very cool. So when we think about President's Club a little bit differently, where we still do it, we don't hit the easy button and just necessarily do cash incentives. We're able to provide an experience. There's something deep and amazing there. We're able to, as Tom points out, seed it throughout a time in the year where retention's still a factor, right? So if people are waiting for that trip, that's always a good thing. Let's call a spade. That is one of the benefits of sort of seeding President's Club when we do. Let's think like a CFO for a sec. So COVID hits, I'm the CFO. I'm looking at the fact that I don't have to pay for President's Club now. I don't want to allocate all that budget to something else. But the CRO and the CMO, they're saying, hey, listen, no, we need to do this for our team. And by the way, CFOs, love you. Maybe you're not saying that, right? But lots of CFOs really do believe in ensuring that we're improving engagement. But having said that, what does the ROI case look like, Kevin? So if we look at Plan B and we do these individualized trips, right? Are we net the same as if we're doing our big President Club? Are we positive? What does that look like?
Yeah. So just I'll answer this. I heard two questions there, right? So the CFO, right, generally, right, budgets happen, first of the year before. And so typically, unless the business is doing really poorly, they're not going to claw that back because it's already been budgeted for, hopefully, right? The second thing is, we've actually done kind of hey, what does a group travel President's Club look like for 100 people? And what does what does individual travel look like for 100 people? And actually, the individual travel comes out a little lower. And the reason why is because you get a group President's Club, right? You have to do these huge dinners, right? You have to do these really extravagant, you can't just, take one tour, right? You have to rent out an entire yacht for everyone, right? And so, you can't just do a dinner reservation. You have to rent out the entire restaurant. And so there's a lot of things about kind of the President's Club that makes it more expensive. Also, it's special, right? When you go on that, right? So it does, it does come with a benefit, but typically we see individual being cheaper because we don't have to do those big things.
I'm just thinking there's a huge amount of write-off on it. Now I'm kind of challenging myself from the top of the call, which, as I said, look, actually there might be a better way of doing this. I'm just thinking about, previous company, we had President's Club for a couple of years in Maui and Hawaii. Well, that's 2 days traveling for me for a 2 or 3 day trip and then 2 days back. So one is I'm not going to attend. We missed 2 in a row. Most CFOs are doing, or sales heads are doing a block booking and saying, right, we'll take 100 seats. So then you've got a scenario like that in a global company where people aren't turning up. I've now maybe got 20% of people not turning up. So I'm now kind of finding my also-rans and who else in the company can we give this away to? Whilst they're grateful, they do know that they weren't first choice. So it's not going to be as motivating. Then you have all of these trips like the yacht trip. Well, I don't like going on boats. I get sick. So I've missed that. So now I've just paid for something else that doesn't have 100% attendance. If the meal's not at the right time, maybe I got a bit playful on the beach or something, had a little bit too much to drink. I'm then going out for my own meal rather than the amount of waste in there is ridiculous.
Yeah. it's a really good point. It's a really good point. In terms of, actually, let's just park there for a sec. So Tom, I'm curious your thoughts on folks when they're looking at deploying a President's Club experience, and you're looking at the team building aspect. So you've been on a number of President's Club, and there's a networking effect, right? There's this opportunity to share experiences with execs, going on jogs with them, having drinks with them. That gets potentially lost in this scenario if we don't compensate that. I want to get Tom's thoughts and then Kevin's on how do we still solve for that? How do we still make that a thing?
So for me, you absolutely have to find another way of providing that. So, for people who made quota or whatever measure it was in the sales organization, they need that exclusive audience and some time. And we as leaders have got to say, well, maybe we'll do mentoring across the group, or you can have an hour a week with a different exec for 6 months to talk through your business strategy and what you want to try and do. And that's not a leader to kind of, subordinate conversation. That's actually as a coach who's looking to develop you, improve your business. And that's priceless, potentially. Yeah, big investment from leadership, but in the terms of the overall number of hours, actually, it's not, and it's probably quite easier to schedule in.
I love that. That's a really neat way to think about that. I know as a rep coming up many years ago, if I had scheduled one-on-one with my VP as an AMA, man, that would be powerful, or a mentoring session. And you're right. I mean, if you look at President's Club, the time investment for an executive, let's say, 5-6 days all in with travel time, that's a lot of hours that you could actually give back strategically within your calendar over the year. I like that. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's something that, you can't get with like individual kind of rewards, right? It has to be complemented with something. And, I think, we're not saying that, that you can get that. And so we're actually telling people to do things exactly like one-on-one mentorship, or, hey, let's hold a kind of exclusive kind of banquet, dinner for these qualifiers, spend a night together. Right. And so it's not about, replacing kind of that feeling. It's like, how do we, figure out something else on the side, right? Or in conjunction too. Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, what do you have to say about, we talked about the financial side of things, and I know a lot of leaders on this call are thinking through the sort of net on that. What about the time investment? So if I'm planning President's Club, and typically my experience in the large organizations I've worked with, it's, often something where you've got a core group that do it every year, and then you've got different exec sponsors that kind of rotate through. But either way, it's a significant time investment, but there's a routine they've got. It's kind of like, hey, we know what the playbook looks like to kind of get that trip to Cabo or to Maui. Now there's no playbook, right? And it's like, and so I'm thinking, if I'm that person where I'm supposed to be the executive sponsor, and maybe I'm on this call, right? And I'm listening in this webinar, and I'm like, well, man, like, you're talking about all these freaking individual trips to wherever. I don't have time for that. I don't know what the playbook is. Help us with that. How do we overcome that without spending just a crazy amount of time and effort when we're actually just trying to drive sales right now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so after, our first kind of, first go at this with Salesforce, we're like, hey, what does President's Club include, right? And so there's this huge promotion period, right? It's over a year, right? And so that's kind of the first part where we're like, hey, we can really help out on this. We can build collateral. We can provide all these marketing materials that people, don't have to create themselves. And so, we're really trying to take kind of some legwork for admins in the promotion period, right? With that help. And then the second thing, right? The bulk of the work really is kind of the planning and executing, right? And you think about hundreds of trips individual, right? Obviously not feasible with an internal team. And so, from that is, we have a concierge team who's handling all the scheduling, all the logistics for these trips, right? They're having planning calls with reps. They're, figuring out what types of restaurants they like. How can we, book something at the destination, right? They're scheduling like tours and activities. And so for admins on that side, it's more of like, hey, give us a list of, who the qualifiers are. And that's really it, right? They get to check in, right? They get to, see how, who's redeeming what, right? There's kind of, a little bit of work there, but other than that, like we handle, all of the logistics, all of the scheduling. And so, big weight off admin shoulders.
That's super good to know. I know coming into this webinar, you were super keen on saying, hey, we're here to help people think about things a little bit differently and sharing a unique perspective in terms of what you're hearing across all these execs with all these big brands you're talking about. And you don't want it to come across as salesy. And I respect that and I appreciate it. But I do think it's important to know that there's companies like yours that are like a concierge service for this kind of thing. So if I'm an executive and I'm tempted to hit the easy button, I can reach out to companies like Blueboard. Question for you. What about the virtual side of things? There's a lot of organizations saying, hey, let's get a virtual gig going on. And we had a great question here in the chat on that. And we'll just do this in a virtual way. What are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Kevin and then over to Tom.
Yeah, and so, interestingly, right, when this happened, right, when the pandemic hit, no one's going on kind of traveling, everyone's staying home. And so we actually really quickly launched what we call an in-home menu, right? How can somebody kind of have the joy of an experience like, in their home? And that might be language lessons, that might be getting a Peloton. We've built out greenhouses for people paired with botany classes, right? Really, really fun, creative stuff. And so, yeah, that's been a big hit right now. I think what's interesting, especially now, right, is you kind of have this risk profile of everyone, right? Some people are kind of itching to get back outside, right? They want to plan their next trip. They might have already planned it, right? And others are kind of like, hey, you know what? Like, maybe, I spend a lot of time with my parents and, they're at risk, or, hey, maybe, I have a lot of kids and I don't want to be traveling as much. What can I do, right? So, there's a spectrum of, hey, you can stay home and, have our in-home experiences. We're also seeing a big return to road trips, right? So maybe we don't want to jump on a plane, but maybe, I'm in San Francisco and I want to spend, some time in Napa Valley, right? And so I can drive there, I can have my own private place, I can get taken care of, I can have dinner in, and so we're seeing a lot of things on the spectrum. And so, just to add to that.
So there's a whole bevy of options that, 3/4 of those I never would have thought about. The greenhouse in the backyard, the Peloton.
Yeah.
Tom, what are your thoughts on the virtual aspect of things here? Should there be a virtual component to President's Club going forward if you're not going to be on a beach in Maui together sipping martinis?
I don't know whether variety. I don't know whether about virtual. I do like the at-home stuff. I'm thinking, again, when you think of the multi-generational workforce, what sets millennials and Gen Zs apart is an element of fairness and not elitism. They want to know that it's fair. And, if I do think, one or two people I've seen at President's Club before in sales, what is it? Time, territory, talent, and target. And they may have no talent, but the other 3 T's turn up and they get to go to President's Club. And you're like, you've just been here a long while. You had the best territory. Literally, you could just spend your time on the golf course and you're going to smash your number. And the new people coming in don't get it. And so there's this element of unfairness. What I see here is the opportunity, because it's a fixed cost for President's Club today, and everybody does the same, kind of had the same bar with what Kevin's talking about. You've got my kind of mental juices going now, is actually, do we want to reward people for doing the right things and the results? So actually like a points-based system during the year that makes the list a little bit more inclusive, that then also allows you, if you're really good in leadership, you're not lazy, you've worked out, well, what does that mean to the business? And what would we invest in that? And scale the prizes appropriately. So it's exactly the same as comp is variable. Then so should be the non-cash rewards. And there's a huge opportunity to get really creative around motivation, individualization, diversity, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Tom, that's really interesting. And we have a teammate we brought on, and originally his idea was like, hey, there's 2 big problems with President's Club today, right? And you're very hitting on it. One is that it doesn't motivate your entire sales force across the year, right? As time goes by, people start to drop off when they realize, they're not able to hit that number, right? Or they're not in the running.
Yeah, the bone's too high, the dog won't jump. Yeah.
Exactly. And the second thing is, right, is it's kind of a one-size-fits-all reward, right? maybe you don't want to go to Hawaii. Maybe you don't want to spend more time with, with your team, right? And so, what's interesting is like, we were talking about originally of like, hey, like, what happens if everyone has a number?
Boom.
Everyone has the ability to win President's Club, right? And it's based on, their role, their territory, right? Because if everyone has a number, then it's like, hey, it's individual, right? And then we roll out and say, hey, what experience do you want to go on at the beginning of the year? Boom, you want to go hike Patagonia. Okay, cool. This is your number to hit it, right? And, you kind of roll that out across and, it differs. And then you're able to motivate the entire team, right? With an individual reward. I know we're getting a little bit on the vision of where we're
Well,
thinking.
I'll give you the business case for that for the sales leaders on the call. From my time in compensation, the companies that peanut butter spread quotas, in other words, just made them flat, performed 4.8% worse than ones who did individualized quotas.
Makes sense.
You could infer that it's exactly the same if you just did flat on President's Club. It's like, you've got to make it attainable, achievable. You can actually drive significant performance.
Absolutely. It helps with the fairness as well. Let's have some fun on this fairness discussion for a sec and think broader, not just sales organizations. So what about the other departments? What are you seeing, Kevin, in terms of organizations that are leading the way in not just including sales with President's Club and including other departments?
Yeah. I think there's been this kind of almost like kind of classic cultural divide, right? And, sometimes we get conversations where like, hey, sales team gets to go on President's Club, we want to do something similar, with everyone else, right? And that's never a good thing, right? Because it does take a village to sell, right? You got to build the product, you got to support the customers, you got to market. And so, I think, as teams feel like they're more connected, and I think as like we start to break down kind of that cultural divide, we are seeing people offer these types of experiences across the board. And it might not be nested under the President's Club, but they might have like a innovators award, for engineering, right? They might have like a top support person, and it's not branded as President's Club, but it's experiential and based. It has very similar qualities, if you will, in the program.
Tom, should non-sales teams be allowed in President's Club?
Why not? Yeah. So, with the thing is OKRs, OSMs, whichever model you use, actually the level of understanding of somebody's impact on the business is getting more granular. Systems are getting better at measuring it. We always used to say salespeople are ultimately measurable by the number, but now through good quality management in businesses, they're able to actually measure the impact across multiple departments and divisions. So yeah, why wouldn't they?
I agree. Kevin, you had a point?
Yeah, no, that's the biggest thing as to why, a lot of executives, wouldn't, is like, hey, measuring non-sales folks is too subjective, right? It puts us too much at risk. It doesn't have that element of fairness, right? But, technology and kind of, management processes have really evolved where it is way more objective than before.
Yeah. For sure. We've got another poll we want to throw up here. And Alex, if you can throw it up. And this one is, if you're not canceling President's Club, how are you adapting? Love to get your thoughts on that. And as we're waiting for that to jump in, one question that came up was around, how there's, I'm not an accountant, but I know there's a write-off element to it. And you sort of referenced that obliquely earlier, Tom. And that is, part of it is you have to have some element of group meeting to justify the write-off of the trip. But Kevin, have you encountered that? Is that something you hear when you're talking to organizations saying, hey, we want to do this unique plan B, which might end up being our plan A going forward if it's awesome, right? But what have you heard that as an objection? How do we still make it a write-off if there's this like critical mass of people we have to have for a meeting for a half day or something like that?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. It's actually not as black and white as President's Club group trips are write-offs or not. It's definitely a fuzzy area. For individual, it is considered taxable income, and so there is really no way around that. But for group trips, it's not, it's a lot of companies actually do tax their employees on those.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's dive in a little bit to other incentives. So we think of President's Club. I think we covered a lot of good ground there. Probably look back to a couple things, by the end of our call. Before we do, let's think about things a little more broadly. So I'd like to do a poll here. What type of sales incentives and rewards does your company offer? So just outside of President's Club. And so we're going to be posting that here right now. So if everyone could please just quickly spend in the next 15 seconds, just jump in with your answer. We'd find it super interesting. It would help inform this discussion. So what types of sales incentives and rewards does your company offer? So we've got sort of 70% at cash right now. Kevin, are we surprised by that?
It's easy. So no, I'm not surprised, but I think that percentage is going to go down over time.
So I just want to make sure everyone's clear. What's your message to those leaders right now that said cash, right? What would you say to them in terms of what you've seen as employee engagement, any results you've seen from and feedback you've heard from leaders about the impact of non-cash incentives versus cash?
Yeah. And just so, strictly from a sales perspective, right? You have this idea of variable reward, right? If you mix things up, right, people tend to respond more, right? It's more top of mind. It doesn't blur into the background, right? And so if you're only offering cash as a spiff reward and they're getting cash as commission, there's nothing really pulling somebody to do that extra behavior, right? Unless you throw more cash at it, right? One of the things we say is like, and we've really studied is that like cash has diminishing marginal utility, right? You actually have to give more of it, more cash, the impact lowers, as you give more, right? And so just the idea of mixing things up is super valuable, right? And so maybe, this quarter, you do cash, the next quarter you do experiences, right? Even just kind of the switching is a great kind of way to change things up.
Yeah, it doesn't have to just be one way. I like that. I mean, it's not cash is always not the answer. You see a mixed bag being the way to go. Tom, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of non-cash incentives, again, because variety is the spice of life. But even in the current climate, I kind of think like this. My week is blurring. What day is it? I'm sure everybody on the call here can't even. You probably have to. Everybody's looked at their calendar now on their computer and gone, "Oh, it's Wednesday, is it? No, it's Thursday. There you go. Got it wrong." The weekend blurs in. Yeah, there's just no variety. It's just plain. Especially here in Europe, where we're not used to working from home.
Yeah.
So where you don't have this amplitude of emotion, where you don't have this relatedness with your employees and your work staff, it's just dull. And that doesn't drive a culture. It's really difficult as a leader. I've now got people who don't want to be on Zoom calls for an hour, which they did before because they wanted to talk at the beginning of this. We've now got it down to 10 minutes, super efficient, in, off, go. I need to give people experiences to help them remember why they're working here. And those at-home experiences, I love that. Giving people a choice. A greenhouse and botany classes for me, poke my eyes out with a pencil. But the idea of like having, the kind of the Peloton bike, I'm all over that like a rash. That's phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay, great.
To add to that, when you mentioned earlier in the call is like, hey, our salespeople coin operated, right? And it's kind of a self-perpetuating relationship, right? They're coin operated when sales leaders continue to give cash, right? Because then they become coin operated, right? It is transactional reward. And if you treat somebody transactionally, they're going to have a transactional relationship with you, right? And so how do we kind of build that relationship in a non-transactional way? Non-cash rewards are a great way, right? I think, Tom, you were like, hey, my significant other is the CRO, right?
Yeah.
We hear that all the time, right? Is like, hey, I've been, this quarter has been, a huge grind for me, or, hey, this engineer has been on this, product release. Now they get to go home and, what does the family want to do together, right? And then you get to give back, right? There's this level of reciprocity between the company and the people's personal lives. And so like those are the type of things that just cash doesn't do, right? And somebody said cash is king, but only to a certain extent, right? It's not like you're taking away commissions. It's not like you have bad base pay or what have you, right? Those are all very important, kind of in this compensation, kind of strategy. But how do you add more to it? How do you make your reps non-coin operated, right? You got to do things differently.
Well, and you've just got to understand human behavior as well. EDSO, endomorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. There's a great Simon Sinek talk all about that. But the endomorphines, saw a great example on the sales floor once in the Nordics. Basically, every time you booked a meeting, you went and grabbed a ping pong ball and you wrote your name on it and you put it in the fish bowl. Everybody clapped you as you did it, by the way. And then at the end of the month, if you put more ping pong balls in there, you've got more chance of winning. They got everybody around, and the CEO came downstairs and picked a ping pong ball out, and that person got a long weekend in the CEO's cabin in the countryside, all catered and paid for, right? Actually, the endomorphines that happened all the way through the month, every time you put a ping pong ball in the fishbowl, was massive. That's what gave people the juice to get going for the next day and the next day and the next day. And then the whole way that they presented the award. It's one of the cleverest incentives I ever came across. And I was like, wow, that person gets it. They knew their floor and they knew how to have them turn up every day. Yeah.
I think that's super cool. There will be leaders that are on this call that are weighing the options of, do we put something in place? Is it too much work? What would you both say to folks that are thinking, hey, we're going to just put things on hold for 6 months here, make another decision? I know what you would say. I'm not trying to lob a softball, but what's the impact to a sales organization if we do that, if we put President's Club on hold? I think it's obvious, but I think it's important for us to actually explore that a little bit. Tom, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put the heebie-jeebies up people. So in this climate, the change is happening like this. It's all over the place. Guess what? Good salespeople will make a mint during this time because there's an intense period of change coming. Nothing happens until something is bought and sold, and good salespeople will gravitate towards those areas. They're going to go and work for the companies that have worked that out and set them up for success, reward them, non-cash, cash rewards, and what have you. So you're just upping your risk if you start to say, hang on a minute, we're not taking part anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with all that. I kind of think of it as, if I was a salesperson, right? And maybe I'm, a younger salesperson coming up, right? I've had my eye on President's Club. I've been grinding all year. I've been so motivated to get it. I get it this year. And now it's canceled. And now it's kicked off down 6 months. How are you going to feel, right? You're going to feel slighted. You're going to feel like it's going to feel unfair, right? You're going to be frustrated. And, those are all the things that you don't want to happen with a top performer, right? You don't want to, this is not a time to demotivate people, right? To discourage people from feeling engaged. And so, you think about it on a one-to-one basis, and it's just like, we don't want our top people to feel like that.
Top 2 rules in compensation: never try and do clawbacks. You're literally stealing money back off somebody. That's the way they feel. Number 2 is delayed gratification doesn't work. Look it up on the internet and you'll see that if you push the incentive 6 months down, you may as well not bother. Because when it comes around, it's a bit like closing business with government or the public sector. By the time it comes around, it's a relief. You're like, oh, great. You've lost the pizzazz and the kind of furore around it, and you're not going to get the return on investment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Kevin, when we go to sort of taking it away from President's Club for a sec, just looking at monthly spiffs, give us some ideas of what you're seeing out there above and beyond what we've already talked about. I'm a sales leader. I wanted to deploy a spiff right now to close the quarter strong. What are some cool things I can think about doing?
Yeah, no, definitely. And so we, just kind of like for us, right, we have, levels starting at $150 US all the way to 25,000, right? And so each level has between, 15 to 50 different experiences, depending on the level, right? And so, what we get to is like, hey, you can choose your level, right? You can pick a few different experiences out of that, but ultimately, right, you don't have to decide, right? Like, you don't have to sit there and be like, what's gonna, motivate all my reps, right? Like, you don't have to come up with the idea, right? And so that's our job. And so that's what we do. It's like, it's you more kind of pick the level, pick some, ideas that, you want to put front and center. And then we do the rest, right? And we can deliver on whatever somebody wants. And so, I think that's what we hear most from sales teams is like, every month, every quarter, they're having to think of these new ideas, and they're literally just like throwing stuff out there, right? They have no idea what's actually going to work, right? And so like we're basically taking that work out of them for them.
Yeah, for sure. Tom, what are some of your favorite spiffs over the years? What really do you find that gets, so I love the idea of ping pong balls, et cetera. What other things, you're leading a sales team right now to have a strong close to the quarter, I'm sure, or month. What are some of the things what are the levers that you find super helpful for your sales team?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert, and that's why I kind of like this choice, if that makes sense, because what motivates me doesn't necessarily motivate one of my members of staff.
Yeah.
Offer me a Lamborghini Gallardo for a weekend and I'll literally move heaven and earth, but for lots of other people they might be a bit more ecologically sensitive, and it could be a mountain biking. For me though, spiffs, I get frustrated when spiffs are not related to what I call frequencies. So frequencies times competencies equals results. Do more of the right things, frequencies, do them better, competencies, you'll smash your number. It's our job as leaders to train and enable our staff and build their competencies. What I'm going to spiff is people doing what I know is going to deliver a number. And these could be small, insignificant things, but they lead to results. Always spiff action, spiff the process. That would be my gift to this meeting. Stop spiffing outcomes, because the same people get the same things.
Yeah, I
love that.
It's just like sales process, right? If we work on the same behaviors that we know resonate with our prospects consistently, we're going to consistently get the right results. No different here.
In sports, it's called process-based thinking, not outcome-based thinking. And we need to get better at learning what are the processes that drive results and spiff those. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as leaders, we have a responsibility to make sure that when we're deploying incentives and larger incentives like President's Club, that we're thinking holistically, and we're thinking about building culture and doing it in a way that has more positives than negatives for sure. And I'm hearing a lot of neat things around that here. I'm going to ask, so for the folks that are listening in here, we've had a couple really neat questions. I'd love to see some more. Please throw them in the Q&A. What's on your mind? There was a question here after we talked about the tax piece. Someone said that, hey, can you cover taxes again? That seems like a key item. I'd prefer it. So that was Chris. Chris, if you can give us more of a specific question, I'd appreciate it. Not sure that, I'm not an accountant. I don't know that Tom and Kevin are, I'm not sure, but hopefully we can help answer something that's on your mind, or if not, certainly get back to you on that. Kevin, when you look at the ground we've covered here, like, let's just think about the folks that are on this call. We've got a lot of senior folks that are really grappling with this challenge, and we've covered a lot of good ground here today, but what have I missed? What else would you like to really impart to the folks that are on here today and make sure that you wanted them to leave here with some good actionable insight? What are some other things that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah. I think, right now is, we're kind of this whole, I guess, like our society is like very reactive in this situation right now. We're trying to figure out what to do. We're trying to do things right. And it's okay to pause and take some time, right? I think a lot, the people that have been offering cash is like, we need to do something. We need to figure it out now. Let's just do the easy route, right? It's okay to we had a customer say, they actually, had something, had a President's Club trip scheduled, March 18th, right? Right at the beginning of this. Obviously they canceled that, and they're like, hey folks, we're going to take a couple months. And we're going to, figure something out to really kind of make it special. It's not going to be a trip, but we don't know what it's going to be. We're going to take some time to figure it out, right? It's okay to pause and, speak, kind of put forward your intentions, right? And then actually think about it, right? I think, just give yourself time to think about doing something special. And whether that's like individual trips, it could be a lot of different things, right? But I don't go to the easiest, right? In sales, It's not oftentimes that the easy way of doing things is the best way, right? And so, I think this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris gave us a bit of color here on the piece that he mentioned. So thank you, Chris. So he says, so Kevin, this is for you, comparing Blueboard rewards and the tax consequences. So effectively doing, spiffs and President's Club through Blueboard, versus your traditional group President's Club. How would you answer the question of sort of tax impact if you compare contrast?
Yeah, definitely. And so the first thing is, is the group trip, is, the individual trip considered compensation, right? Generally, both cases is yes. And so the tax treatment is either, hey, I don't want my employee to pay any taxes, and so you're going to gross up, cover the amount of taxes, or, it's been communicated that, hey, you are going to have to pay a portion, and then that tax is passed along to the employee. And so that's kind of the treatment of these types of rewards.
I love it. Another great question here from Carrie. So she says, Carrie says, how do you budget for the experiences? I.e., my club would have X per person budget, but if someone picks baking bread class versus someone picks Peloton. So I think what I'm hearing there is like, instead of giving a specific thing versus, hey, here's a host of things you could purchase at this level. What do you see there? What do you see as best practices there that really resonate with your customers?
Yeah, no, exactly. So in the product, right, if you choose call it $5,000 level experience, right? Yeah. You're only going to see the experiences for that level, right? And so you're not going to see the baking bread classes, right? You're going to see the Peloton bike. You're going to see the greenhouse. You're going to see, the trip to Mallorca. And so, we kind of control for that so that doesn't happen.
Okay. All right. And then Robert, thank you. Robert is asking here, do you consider setting up a mentor program as a good incentive? In other words, earning a mentor status by achieving goals or doing all the right things to coach a new rep?
Is there a number bigger than like 1 gazillion % somewhere along the lines? If I look at, just kind of some of the requests that come into Sales Hacker or on other global boards like Revenue Collective, the hunger of people who are in, say, the first 10 years of their sales career, so they're SDRs, early stage AEs, they're desperate to learn and to have mentors, and they recognize experience and they want to look at new ways of working. Wow, what a great idea. I'd have, if somebody was offering somebody up for mentorship, I'd have reps ripping your arm off for it. Yeah.
We actually have a customer that has a sales mentorship program, right? And they pair obviously experienced sales folks with kind of people younger in their careers, and if the person who's being the mentee hits a percentage goal, they actually get to do an experience together. And it's not a President's Club type of experience; it's much smaller, but it's a nice little like, hey, if you hit this goal, you could do something special together. So I thought that was an interesting use case.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm often asked like what books do I recommend reps read for their development? And it's a great question. But when I look at most of the development that took place for me over the years, it's not books, it's mentors. It's senior leaders that have been there and they have imparted their knowledge either through me observing. So I would watch our vice president of sales just kick ass in an amazing presentation, right? Or I would seek out mentors who would have quarterly meetings with me. And like that is just huge. So to incentivize a team through that, to offering people's time. And it's funny, as yes, I'm a millennial, but as I get older, there is that desire to actually impart what we've learned, right? And so senior leaders, more often than not, although time constrained, are happy to serve as mentors if asked. And so I know that's a little off topic, but even outside of President's Club, for the sales reps, the individual contributors that are on today, or junior sales managers, seek out a mentor if you don't have one today. Ask them to mentor you. Okay, we're kind of rounding the corner here to the end. Any final questions, please throw them on here, but let's just do a quick round the horn wrap up. Tom, for you, any final thoughts or comments as we wrap up here?
Yeah, my only one, actually just playing off what you've just said, is, a lot of people now have one of these call recording solutions on Zoom, you know, where they're transcribing the meetings and what have you. In the remote economy, and the sales leaders on here, send out a message if you wanted to spiff the idea of them, you know, listening to some people's calls and give them some coaching and some mentoring, and say, look, I'll do 10 a month, but it's based on people hitting targets, or if you've done enough calls or you've done enough, whatever it is. You know, some of these spiffs and things don't have to cost anything more than just time. Let's get creative.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to find anyone that believes in what you just said more than me, because at Replays, that's all we do all day is call reviews.
Okay. All right. There you go.
But it's true, right? The average rep gets call coach less than one call every 6 weeks. That's painful. Wow. When you think about it, just painful. And but on the flip side, if you look at the silver lining, what an amazing opportunity. And so apportioning budget to professional development in a meaningful way of interactively sitting and going through Zoom recordings of discovery and demo calls. I love that. Kevin, final thoughts from you. You know, we're going to talk in a second about how to reach out and get a hold of you, et cetera, in your organization. But anything else you want to leave this awesome audience with today?
Yeah, no, I think it, you know, what we're talking about is important in the long term, right? You know, we see data on kind of how engaged and how people perform, right? And there's really three things, right? What are their thoughts and perspectives on leadership, right? Do they have career and learning development? And then do they feel recognized and rewarded, right? And so the two we've been talking about today, right? Obviously the recognition and reward Presence Club, and then like the mentorship, the learning and development. And so those two things, if you're really thoughtful about, can have such an outsized impact on, you know, how people are engaged, how people perform, how long they stay at a company, right? And so, yeah, it's a great place to spend a disproportionate amount of time.
Okay, thank you. As we round the corner, just a couple more minutes here, I'm going to ask, we're going to do a quick poll. For those of you that are interested in connecting with Blueboard, please just say yes, please. And we'll make sure that someone on the Blueboard team reaches out. And Kevin, how can the folks on the call get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, and so you can email us directly, kevin@blueboard.com. I'll field those. You can also go to our website, blueboard.com, and you know, submit a request. Yeah, easiest way.
Okay, and before I do a final summary here, Tom, we had a little bit of a fun before this call talking about brick walls. So I am jealous about your brick wall because this came from China about 3 weeks ago. Yours, I understand, didn't. Is that right?
It didn't. No. So this house is older than Denver. It was built in, I think, 1885. So the wall behind me is actually about I don't know, 1.5 feet, 2 foot thick. And that's the internal bricks. They're called yellow bricks. The red bricks are more expensive. They're on the outside of the house, and the internal walls were yellow. And as I was saying to you, the builders, when we were doing the refurb, were cussing me because I had them literally take off every little last piece of plaster so that it just looked amazing and gave me a bit of history.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I love your brick wall. At least I can take mine to, like, you know, trips with me and stuff like that. That's kind of cool, but I still like the brick wall there. I want to just quickly summarize. So I think what I've heard today is, number one, if I'm a sales leader today and I'm thinking about, I know I've used this term a million times. I'm going to use it again. I'm thinking about hitting the easy button and just doing cash incentives, or worse, actually just canceling President's Club and any incentives. It's probably not the most, it's probably not in my best interest to do that. Despite the tough financial times we're having, there is a direct return we get from a President's Club style reward that is done thoughtfully. And Kevin and Tom have given us just some awesome insight today on what companies are doing that are individualized and can still have pretty much all the benefits. And the team building benefit and the sort of executive exposure benefit can actually be augmented in some pretty freaking awesome ways. So guys, thank you. I've really personally enjoyed having this conversation with both of you. And have a fantastic day. For folks that want this recording, we're going to be sending it out in 24 hours. Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.